3. And since our meeting is fully remote, I am going to go through the script for remotely conducted open meetings. And as a preliminary matter, this is Nancy Kavanaugh, Chair of the Hopkinton School Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, can you please respond in the affirmative? Jen Devlin.
Yes.
Holly Moran.
Yes.
Amanda Fargiana.
Yes.
Leah Batley Rafferty.
Yes.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Carol Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Susan Rothermick.
Yes.
Jeff LeBrod.
Yes.
And did I get everybody? Carol, or are there others that because my screen is pretty full?
No, I think
That's okay. That's what I thought. Okay, good evening. This is the open meeting of the Hopkinton School Committee. It's being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the pandemic. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspended the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with agenda meeting materials, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Hopkinton School Committee is convening by Google Meet as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting is also being broadcast by HCRAM through one or many of its channels or platforms. Meeting materials and packets have been provided by the body and are available on the town's website via web meeting calendar. The public is encouraged to follow along the posted agenda unless noted otherwise. Meeting business ground rules. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will invite board members to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. And there is no public comment, so I'm going to pass over that last section of it. And I would, Dr. Kavanaugh, if you would like to open with our conversation about the FY24 budget. I think you are muted.
Yeah, thank you. So I did put together some slides tonight. I know we have a lot of people on our call, so I wanted to go back and review a little bit of the budget process and then let you know where we are today in terms of the reductions to the original 8.3% over FY23 ask. So I'm going to share the screen with you. Oops. Okay, so thank you. This is just a very quick budget update, and it's designed really to generate some dialogue among this group. And this is our special school committee meeting of March 14th, 2023. So just for some background, and I know that the school committee has lived through this for a very long time, so this background is really designed to, help some of the folks at home who may just be tuning in to understand how this process works. So the Hopkinton Public Schools, internally, we start our budget process in late September. And what that means is that all of the building principals and the directors are sitting down with the people in their departments or their buildings, and they're chiseling away and thinking about what the budget will look like. But the budget becomes very public in that period between November and February. And I would assert that we very frequently and very transparently share the budget as it's being developed and as the number continues to change during that period between November and January. On January 12th, as we always do, we held a public hearing, and that was to share the final budget with elected board members, hired personnel, educators, parents, and taxpayers who were all that evening at the high school in attendance. And the school committee then voted 1 week later on January 19th. You voted in a $60,157,855 budget, which was 8.3% over fiscal year 23. And things were going along for about 40 days until February 28th, when at a select board meeting, the board asked the schools to reduce that budget increase from 8.3% to 5.1%. And as we do the math on that, we realize that that's a $1.7 million reduction. And so the school employees sat down and we thought about the ways in which you would remove $1.7 million. And it's not easy to just take away the cuts, the additional positions that we had asked for, because some of those additional positions are non-negotiable. In fact, up to 4.5% of the budget increase was non-negotiable, meaning that that money had to go to increased cost of living percentages for our bargaining units, teacher step and lane changes, and then just, sort of basic inflation. So 4.5% was non-negotiable. And some of those asks are also non-negotiable because they apply to things that are required by kids' civil rights or special education. And so when we sat down, this list that you see on the screen right now, and I won't read it to you because I think many people in the community are familiar with it, it was very deep and it was very broad. And for people who might be looking in that, wondering, is there an area, an order of prioritization? The answer to that is no. I mean, what you're seeing there are just the things that we thought might be nice to have as opposed to need to have. Places where we said, well, let's just eliminate a program. Places where we said we could maybe live without one school bus, although that doesn't feel like a good idea when our bus routes are very long and the buses, some of them are exceedingly crowded. But those are the things that we put on the list in order to come up with $1.7 million in reductions if we were to go from 8.3 to 5.1. And then just this past Saturday, on March 11th, our town manager released a comprehensive budget update. And in that document, the school's ask needed to be reduced less drastically. It was going from 8.3% to 7.7%. And we learned that it would be about a $350,000 reduction. So once again, the school administrators, all the building principals, and all of the directors sat and we rolled up our sleeves and we sharpened our pencils. And this is where we are today. So I want you to notice that on the screen right now in the yellow font on the right-hand side, it says we are not there yet. But I feel like we have made some inroads. And so what we looked at are the 2 tech integration specialist positions. They existed on the original list of cuts, and they have now made it to this list as well. The cost for 2 tech integration specialists in the district is $220,000. Now we have to remember that these are people who are at the top of the salary schedule. So if you remove those positions, and what we decided to do was not to remove both of them, but to reduce those positions by 1.4. So one of those people would go into either an elementary classroom because the person is certified elementary 1 to 5, or could go into a math classroom because that person is also certified mathematics 5 to 8. So there is a place to move that person. So it's not as if we need to cut a human being, but we are eliminating that position. The second of those 2 positions would only be a 0.4 reduction. And so that particular teacher who majored in computer science as an undergraduate, would be qualified to teach computer science at 0.4 at the high school level, and that person would remain 0.6 tech integration specialist, so that we're not living without a tech integration specialist, but rather we would be living with 0.6 tech integration specialists. The savings on that only equates to $120,000 because of the amount of money that these 2 people were making at the high end of the salary schedule, and sort of looking at replacing people. When we budgeted, we imagined that we would hire an elementary teacher at something less than that. We typically estimate about $75,000 for those positions. So we also wanted to hire, and this was an ask from Mr. Bishop, high school principal. He was looking for a 1.0 FTE, and that would be made up of 0.6 in BTE, which is business, technology, and engineering, and fine arts at 0.4. We've eliminated the 0.4 fine arts, and the 0.6 was reduced to 0.4, meaning that the computer science person that we talked about above would take up that 0.4 BTE. So, and that was a really important ask for Mr. Bishop because our kids are clamoring for more computer science. So it's nice that we have someone in our district now who could slide into that position, because we did worry that you wouldn't be able to find someone at 0.4. And then that allows us to save another $45,000. So looking at lines 1 and 2 of that table, we're up to saving $165,000 with those moves. And we have not had to eliminate people from our district, but we have had to eliminate positions and asks for next year. Then we went very carefully through the one-time purchases, which we've been asked to do. And if we take out the furniture asks, the shelving asks, the maps, a tuba, and some textbooks, we can get to $70,000 there. So we're making progress. We're at $235,000 right now. And with the one-time purchases, if at the end of the school year, at the end of the fiscal year, there's a little bit of money left, we might be able to buy that tuba or the furniture that was asked for. So we are currently at $235,000. That gets us a lot closer to $350,000. And here's our place of haziness. So we have additional positions that we say, okay, we could possibly cut them if we needed to. But right now, our assistant superintendent, Jeff Lebrod, has filed for a grant. He's requested a grant through the Student Opportunity Act. And we believe that there's a very high likelihood that we are going to get that grant, and it can be used for positions. And so we could take one of our positions or 1.5 of our positions that were asks for next year, and we could fund that through the Student Opportunity Act grant. That would be amazing if we were able to do that, but we haven't got confirmation yet from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that that money will come to us. So what we're sort of asking the town tonight, we hope, is that they'll give us a little bit of time to wait on that $110,000, or that if we don't get it, that they would be willing to support that position in the amount of $110,000. And I hope that they'll grant us the time, because I know that our town manager has said very frequently that we're still relatively early in the budget process, that we still have quite a ways to go before annual town meeting in early May. I show this all the time, and I just want to show this because I think it's very relevant to the budget. Today, we're sitting at 4,202 students. And if you look at Dr. Wagman, he was one of our demographers, his predictions, he said that at the end of the 22-23 school year, we'd be at 4,104. We are well above that now. And Dr. Wagman predicts that by the time we get to the 2030-2031 year, we'll be at 4,745. When we planned our budget for 23-24, we planned using the 4,186 number that you see on the 23-24 line. Today, we're already above that, and we haven't even entered into FY24 yet. One more demographer's predictions, and we like to show this as well, is that the MSBA has projected that by the year 2032, we will have about 4,975 students in the Hopkinton Public Schools. I believe that these numbers are real. They're at least tracking slightly ahead of where they say that we will be. So our real numbers are even bigger than the projected numbers. Very frequently we'll hear, I can't imagine where those children will come from, but they are already here. One other thing that I wanted to show people is our per pupil expenditure, and this is by district ranking. There are 321 school districts across Massachusetts who land in these rankings. And what per pupil does is it puts dollar values into buckets. So there's a bucket, for example, for administration, a bucket for instructional leadership, a bucket for teachers, all the way down to how much are you paying for insurance and retirement and those kinds of things, operations and maintenance. I don't necessarily know that the individual numbers are all that important, but you can see that we are ranking 199th, for example, out of 321, or 316th out of 321. The one place where we have a green circle on this chart is under professional development. And when you do your per pupil expenditure, it counts the grant money that you get. So the one place where we are in the top 30% is where we are aided by grants. Otherwise, if you look at the colors of those circles, blue means we're in the bottom 50% in the state, and red means we're in the bottom 25% in the state. We have a lot of red circles there. And I certainly don't regret or resent doing a whole lot in Hopkinton with a little, but at some point there has to be a breaking point. And so I just want to make sure that people understand that we are not spending money frivolously in the Hopkinton Public Schools, but rather our budget year to year is exceedingly conservative and our student enrollment growth is exceedingly great. And so that's all I have for you, and I will stop sharing my screen now. I think if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen. There we go.
There you go. Thank you.
Mhm.
So school committee members, do people have questions, comments, or thoughts you want to share now ahead of our joining the select board meeting?
I have a question. I was trying to take notes as you were talking, Dr. Kavanaugh, and I just want to make sure I got it right. So by shifting the positions around, we aren't taking someone's job in the way that it's presented tonight. It's just shifting around of positions. So there are no teachers who need to worry about their position being eliminated, just changed.
That is correct right now. And the people whose positions would be sort of reassigned to vacant positions, they have been notified.
Okay.
So I don't want to jump in if somebody else wants to jump in ahead of me, but I so appreciate how you have been able to take this information on a pivot, especially it seems like we've been bouncing back and forth kind of like a ping pong ball on this for the past couple of weeks. It is, I know, a big ask to look under all the rocks to find where we can do things a little bit differently. I do think kind of in the spirit of Mr. Khumalo saying that we are in the early stages of the budget season. It feels a little different to us because we've been doing this for so long, but I would want to ask the select board to keep at least that $110,000 in the budget for right now. We know that they'll come back to us down the line if they don't have the funding for it, and we'll at that point, I hope, have a definitive answer on the Student Opportunity Act grant. That would be my...
Yes, and I know that they keep saying too that their budget it fluctuates. You know, all of their revenue isn't accounted for now, so there may be some way, even if we don't get the grant, to be able to. Although I'm very hopeful we will.
Which I think is great. I'd like to see it stay in there tonight until we know, at least, just because I know historically when we vote or once they have voted their number, there are not dollars that go back into the school committee budget. Funding shifts around and things get changed, often reduced a little bit, but I've never seen it go up even $1. And I'm concerned that if we don't hold that as a placeholder in what we're intending to have as positions, that we could end up without them if we don't get the grant, even if it's a small chance.
Are we expected to take a vote? Is that
We are not posted to take a vote tonight. I would not. I think it probably makes sense to see what the select board is going to do tonight when they vote, and then we can discuss taking a vote from there. Is that, Dr. Kavanaugh, would that be what your expectation of tonight was as well?
Yes.
can I say something? I don't want to step on anybody else's toes. So I think Dr. Kavanaugh alluded to this when she started her presentation, and I as a member of this elected body, I understand that cuts need to be made within the community. We're part of a community. Everything changes. We're growing. I had an issue with the implication that this budget was made in the dark. It was not made in the dark. We had 11 budget meetings between November and January 19th. We had 3 listening sessions. We got 3 bonus meetings in the past 2 weeks. We had 2 joint meetings. We had hundreds of emails. We had conversations with families, with CPAC, with community members that are not members of like school usage community members. frustrates me to no end that that was a feeling that I got, and that's the feeling that I get from conversations that are happening both online and in person, and statements that have been made. I do believe that this board were charged with three things: administrative oversight, budget, and policy. And I think that we take all three of those very seriously. And I know that I have a lot of things to say and a lot of questions to ask. And I don't believe that any one of the five of us shirked our responsibilities in any way when we presented this budget. And I continue to stand behind it. And that's all I had to say about it.
Thank you, Holly, for sharing that. I love your ability to bring in the data and to count the meetings that we've had. I agree with you. We did this in a very open and transparent way. In our discussions, we had a fabulous amount of community feedback. I have heard from people who don't have children in our district who are concerned because the educational system that we have seen grow over the past several years, and not just grow in size but really grow in excellence, it impacts them. They want to live in a community that has an outstanding school system. I have heard from people who are outraged at the thought of us having to make cuts, people who are willing to go to town meeting and make a motion on town meeting floor to amend the budget to put the money back in for us. It's always been my hope that we would be able to solve this quickly and reasonably with the select board. But I stand behind our budget. I understand that there are areas where the town may not fund us to the full amount that we voted on January 19th. But I sincerely hope that they are able to hold our students, our schools, our teachers, and our community in a way that protects the excellence that we have. Of course, there's no guarantee on whether or not the select board will vote tonight on either what we hope for or even what Mr. Khumalo has recommended for them. So I think it is important that we're going to be in that meeting. It's not a joint meeting, so we won't have the same equal consideration and ability to speak that we would in a joint meeting. But I did speak with the chair, and she has said that they will allow us to put some information out at the beginning of their budget discussion.
Thank you, Nancy.
So I also want to say I stand in agreement with you, Holly. I did not like the kind of insinuation that somehow we hadn't been clear about where we were going with the budget. I also think that this is the second year in a row where Dr. Kavanaugh and Susan have been asked to make significant cuts in a very short period of time, when it takes them weeks to get together the principals, to get together all the administrative people, to start to really think hard about the problem before they even start the first of the presentations to us, in October, right? And then suddenly they're asked to make gigantic cuts in the course of 2 weeks. I can only imagine the kind of rushed emergency feel to everything, and all these people who have thought carefully about what they're doing are suddenly being pulled in and having to last minute hope that they're making the right decisions about what things they're going to cut, because they don't have the time to consider them the way they did in the fall. So if nothing else, I think, like you've said, we've been open and very clear about where we're going. And the collaborative conversations should be happening. We should be doing this while we're working on it, so that there's not this big giant surprise at the end that says, cut 500K, cut 300K. Like, that's a very hard thing to do in a short period of time in a responsible way.
We didn't have excess either. I don't think that, no. We had 45 additional teacher requests from the HTA, and Elmwood presented a flat budget to us and didn't add a single penny, so we didn't have access.
And Dr. Kavanaugh had presented to us back, now I've forgotten if it was, I believe it was in January, on the 19th when we voted the budget, but the number of requests that administrators really wanted the positions added in that didn't make it quite to our level, that there are definitely things that I know would be beneficial to our schools, but in holding that fiduciary responsibility, they didn't make it to bubble up even to this point. And I hold that kind of in my thought as well, and looking at what the coming year and the coming 5 years really holds if we can't support our students in FY24.
Nancy, if I could just make a comment.
Please.
First of all, thank you to you and the administrators again for going through this cycle, and for bringing forward what you think you could do to be a good citizen. It makes me very uncomfortable to look at these cuts, particularly, I mean, I appreciate that the tech integration specialists, maybe are higher paying and not as student focused, but they were certainly critical in the pandemic. They're certainly critical resources that have gotten us through lots of difficulty and provided a great resource for the teachers. So it is not a light cut that we're making. I mean, that is a significant reduction that is being requested. Looking at things like the one-time purchases of furniture and shelving and Tuba Tech, this is because of growth. This is actual, like, chairs and desks and shelves to put stuff on because we need more equipment because we're growing. This is not fluff. They're one-time purchases, but this is significant. We don't have any fat in the budget. I appreciate what you've done. I would like myself to understand from the select board tonight where the number came from. Where did the 350 come from? I couldn't quite figure out. I know there are different buckets in the municipal budget that are somewhat discretionary. There's a judgment about like how much we put for OPEB or how much we put in our stabilization fund at the municipal level. And, there are probably other places where we've made judgment calls. And I'd be curious to understand how we got to 350, because I don't think I saw that clearly in the presentation. But I absolutely stand behind holding off on any additional cuts that we think we can get grant funded. I wouldn't want to put anything else forward. I'm hesitant to put these items forward, but I don't know, Nancy, if you would like us to agree on any kind of a response.
So I think it may be an agreement by consensus of our response would be a helpful thing to have at this point.
I mean, I hear us
In what way?
So I guess in terms of looking at what Dr. Kavanaugh presented, I think the tech integration specialist piece, I don't know how people feel if that was going to be shifted in the way. The one-time purchases, I don't also know, I know that Amy Ritterbusch had made a comment about one-time purchases in our last meeting. I don't know if the intention of that was to be able to fund them in an alternative way in the budget, if they had potentially other funding sources that would be acceptable for a one-time purchase like the ones listed. Do you, Susan, or Dr. Kavanaugh, have a sense of if there's another mechanism they might be willing to fund one-time purchases with?
I think they did think that they would try to fund those through free cash, but I'm not going to be positive on that.
So we could potentially ask that in the meeting too. So looking kind of at it off the top of my head at that slide you had put up, Dr. Kavanaugh, about proposed reductions in the light of this 350, it looks like what you're proposing is that we ask them to hold to a roughly 250, or my math without having that in front of me is a little rusty, but to hold that so that we're able to keep those student-facing positions, the ones that have the most impact on students in the classroom, keep those intact. Is that?
Yes, I think right now we're at 235,000, and the positions that are out there that could be grant covered are positions that we believe will impact teaching and learning.
Okay.
And so we would like to hang on at least the $110,000 until we learn about that grant. And if we take the 235 and add the 110, we're at 345.
Okay, so we're going to ask them instead of a $350,000 reduction to hold at 235 then, basically.
Please.
Is that,
That would be great.
how do people feel about that on the school committee?
I didn't vote for the original budget because I didn't think we had enough student-facing staff on it, and I am not inclined to lower that number. So, I defer to the wisdom of my colleagues, but I'm not inclined to agree to any cuts.
I'm with Holly on that one. I'm going to stand by my statement from the other night. I voted on a budget that I thought was as lean as it could possibly be. I understand that we're trying to work in partnership with, creating a budget for the community. But if that requires a $70,000 reduction in bookshelves and seating, I guess that is the one thing I'm really comfortable with. But even the restructuring of positions rubs me the wrong way. It's implying that they aren't vital positions, and I do think it will affect teaching and learning. I think the tech integration specialists, it's not like technology doesn't actually progress rapidly. And so I think they have a very vital function in the schools that as technology changes, they're on the cutting edge and they're keeping it going. So I'm not comfortable with it. I understand the need to be cooperative, but this isn't something I support. If we need to cooperate, so be it, but I'm not going to support it, if that's the right way to say it. So I don't know how to express that in terms of, if this were up in front of me to vote on it, I wouldn't vote for it, I guess is the best way to put it.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, Leah, did you want to add anything to that?
I think for me, I need to understand where the 350 came from. I kind of need to just understand this ask a little bit more because we are trying to be good partners, but there are lots of judgment calls made along the way, and they're important. And I'm not saying that the select board or the town manager is not, really given this a lot of thought, but things have turned so quickly in the 11th hour that I would like to understand a little bit more where we are. So I'm going to kind of hold judgment.
Okay.
I wouldn't go any deeper than what Dr. Kavanaugh has presented. I'm not sure how will vote when and if we have to vote, because I really want to understand why what is the trade-off? Like, is there something more critical? I can't see it, but if I can be convinced, then, maybe these expenses could be reduced. I don't like it. I'm also extraordinarily concerned about our per pupil expenditure. And that's only going in one direction right now. And yet we see the town manager in his memo citing the fact that our Chapter 70 money tripled what they expected. So that is all based on enrollment. So clearly we are not making up this enrollment growth. The state is giving us like almost 3 times what they originally put in the budget for Chapter 70 money, because we have that many more students. So I think those are not factors that we can discount when we're casting our eventual vote on whatever this is. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, my personal view on this is I was Board of Assessors. I am very willing to be collaborative about taxes and thoughts. My reaction right now has more to do with the fact that we put everything out there to collaborate, right? We could have been having these conversations as we were going along. And instead, we got a lot of nodding. And then last minute, we got, no, we don't like it, right? And that's not really a collaboration, right? So I think I'm holding off a little bit on my reaction to the cuts, partially because I'm trying to understand if my personal reaction is more that I'm so frustrated about the lack of collaboration. And so I'm like reacting to that, right? Versus necessarily the back and forth with the cuts right now. So I don't think we have a lot to trim. I don't like what I'm seeing, but I want to understand I guess, like Amanda said, I want to understand more, and then I want to try to temper my own reaction and make sure that I'm reacting to the right thing, if that makes sense.
It does. So what I'm hearing then is that the school committee does not have a consensus on any cuts that could be made. I think instead request that they leave the full 350 in our budget, since, as Mr. Kamala said, this is the beginning for them, with the opportunity to continue to look at opportunities to save. Is that,
That's fair.
Yes, that sounds.
does Dr. Kavanaugh or Susan, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
My only additional thing is to follow up on Amanda's comment. As we're communicating with them tonight, I know, Nancy, you're in the position to do that. It would be nice to learn about the origin of the number 350.
So I will ask that. And I am looking at the time. It is 6:39. I know that the select board is due to return to their meeting momentarily. So I think if we're ready to hop into the select board meeting.
Yeah. Can I make a request for this Thursday's meeting? I know, and I would like to have, if we can, a discussion at some point about our capital requests, because I've seen a lot of misinformation in the universe and communicated to me about what our capital expenses look like and our capital requests over the next 5 and 10 years.
So I have seen some of the same things I think that you have, and it is frustrating. I do try to continue to point out that the next 5 years have not been voted on, and that we have in fact had discussions about how to be collaborative in meeting the town's fiscal ability to fund our capital requests as well as the rest of the town's capital requests.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I
So
can take it back, Nancy. I think they're reconvening as we speak.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Jen.
So I would then seek a motion to adjourn for the purposes of joining the select board meeting.
So moved.
So that's a motion by Holly. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Leah. And then we'll do a roll call vote starting with you, Jen,
Yes.
Holly,
Yes.
Amanda,
Aye.
Leah.
Aye.
I am also a yes, and we are adjourned at 6:40. Thank you all who were able to tune into this, and I would encourage people to hop over to the select board meeting, which is also being broadcast by HCAM, but we are able to hop in through the Zoom link provided on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you in a minute.
Thank you. Good
Bye.
night.
So that's all I see is just the one. Okay, so if we could liven up Sitharaman Gansian.